les pronoms sujets et le verbe avoir. There's two parts of these notes that we're going to take today. First, we're going to talk about subject pronouns, and then we're going to talk about our first verb, the verb avoir. So first of all, let me just talk a little bit about subjects and verbs. In English, French is the same. All sentences have subjects and a verb. The subject is a person or thing that does the action in the sentence. It's typically a noun, and it's sometimes a pronoun. When we don't want to say my friend, but we want to say she, we'll use a pronoun. Denise est une amie. Remember seeing the sentence, elle a 15 ans, she is 15 years old? Now we could say Denise is 15 years old, or we could use a pronoun to say she is 15. Now a verb is an action word or a linking word in our sentence. So all sentences have a subject and a verb. Now our verb can be a linking word, which means is or are can be verbs. We typically think of verbs as jumping or running, but linking verbs like is or are also verbs. So all of our sentences have to have those two components. So if you look at these sentences here, and we write down or circle the subject in each sentence, and then put a box around the verb, we would have the subject as her name, and then is the verb. This is the subject of the sentence, this is a verb. Sometimes it's easier to see it like this. She is 15 years old. Or, comment elle s'appelle? Here's our subject, elle. Here's our verb, calls herself. Michel a quel âge? Michel is how old? Here's our subject, Michel, our noun, our person, and here's our verb. Elle a 15 ans? Here's our subject, and here's our verb. So all sentences, in order for them to be a sentence, must have a subject and a verb. Now, in French, we have, just like in English, several different subject pronouns. So when we don't want to use somebody's name, but we want to use a pronoun instead, we'll use these, our subject pronouns. So let's write down what the French words for these are. En anglais, if we want to say I, in French we'll say je. For you, when we're talking to one person, so this is the informal way, we'll use tu. Remember seeing this in comment tu t'appelles? What is your name? Just like we saw je in je m'appelle, I call myself. He will use the word il, like il s'appelle, his name is. She will use elle. We've seen all of these so far. Now here's a new one that we haven't seen before, and it is the French word for one, or someone in general, and that's the word on, O-N. We'll talk more about that a little later. To say we, now this is brand new to us, we haven't seen this before. We're going to use the word nous. To say you all, or you, when you're talking to somebody formally, we'll use the word vous, like in comment allez-vous. To say they, if it's a mixed group of people or all a group of guys, we'll use il. Now notice, il sounds just like this il because that S is silent. But this is what you want to say for they if it's a mixed group of people or a group of guys. And then elle, which again sounds just like the word for she, only has an S on the end, but that S is silent. So je, tu, il, elle, on, nous, vous, il, elle. Those are the subject pronouns that we'll use in sentences. The pronouns that we'll use when we don't want to say somebody's name. Alright, next, just a couple little things to tell you. Je is going to change to J apostrophe before a vowel sound. You can't have that I and je next to a vowel. We'll see that with our verb avoir. And tu and vous, remember, both mean you. However, tu is what you're going to use when you're talking to a friend, a family member, or someone that is your own age, informal. Where vous, you'll use formally when you're talking to more than one person or an adult who is not a family member. That's why I say to you all, to my class, comment allez-vous, because you're a group of people. Alright. Also, the pronoun on doesn't really have an English equivalent. The meaning depends on the context. On can mean we, like in let's go to the movies. Or they, people in general, like people in France. speak French, or just one, like we use very formally in like research papers and that kind of thing. So to give you an example sentence, en France, on parle français. In France, and you could translate this as one speaks French, or they speak French, or we speak French. Basically the general idea of French is spoken in France. It's very commonly used, where for us the word one sounds very formal. Alright, now let's take a look at our first verb, the verb avoir. Now avoir means to have. So we're going to use this to say people have things. I have things, you have things. Now avoir is considered to be an irregular verb. And so what that means is that each subject, je, tu, il, on, nous, vous, has a different form. Now we don't have very many verbs like that in English, and so it's a little bit hard for us to remember. So for each of those subject pronouns, we have to remember a different spelling of the verb avoir. So I like to always put verbs in boxes where we have our singular subjects on the left side and our plural subjects on the right side. And I'm going to write next to these subject pronouns the form of the verb avoir that goes with that subject to say those people have something. So to say I have in French, we'll add the form a. Now notice we take away the e and je because a starts with a vowel. And we'll say j'ai. So j'ai means I have. You know what? I'm going to rewrite that in black. I think it'll be easier for you to see. J'ai. To say you have is tu as. Tu as quel âge? Remember that expression? How old are you? You're literally saying you have which age in French. To say he or she or one has, il, elle, on, a. Again, we had that in the expression elle a 15 ans. She's 15 years old. To say we have, nous avons, A-V-O-N-S. You pronounce that S in nous like a Z sound because a vowel follows it. To say you all have, vous avez, A-V-E-Z. Again, you pronounce the S in vous like a Z because a vowel follows it. And to say they have, you'll use the form ont, O-N-T. Ils ont. So those are our forms of the verb avoir to say that people have certain things. Noun subjects are going to use the same verb forms as the pronouns that replace them. So for example, if we want to say Pierre and Jean have 2 chairs, we'll use exactly the same form that we would use if we want to say they have 2 chairs. And according to the box that we just filled in, to say they have, we'll use ont, O-N-T. Ils ont 2 chaises. They have 2 chairs. And because this is also talking about 2 people, so it's third person plural, we'll use that same form. So you use the same form whether you're using a pronoun as the subject or if you're using someone's name as the subject. Okay, so there's a lot in those notes, which means you may have to go back and rewind it a little bit or stop it to write things down, but we want to make sure we know all of those subject pronouns and the forms of the verb avoir that go with it to say that certain people have certain things. Au revoir les élèves.